This is part two for personality for general psych. And I forgot to mention the first part. We finished with Freud that forgot about the defense mechanisms because on the test you're going to have to match the eight. There's denial, which means you deny it ever happened. Repression is where you can't remember certain events of the situation, like Tiger Woods can't remember anything about the crash. He's not denying it, but he can't remember any part, so that's repression. If he said he was never in a crash, that would be denial. Projection is when you project somebody else's, you project to somebody else your own feelings, like, oh my God, is Jimmy grumpy all the time? You're probably grumpy all the time. You're projecting on Jimmy. Displacement is where you take it out on somebody else or some other thing. I love it when baseball players break a bat, like it's the bat's fault they didn't hit the ball. Um, you yell at your kid, and your kid goes and beats up his little brother because he can't take it out on you. There's reaction formation where you act just the opposite of the way you feel. So your sister's significant other is you can't stand that person, but instead of being angry at them, you just kill them with kindness. Rationalization, where you make up reasons for what something. Oh, on Wednesday's test, I flunked it because Julian's questions are too hard. Then there's regression, where you regress to an earlier time. Little kids sometimes about 5 or 6, when they like a little brother or sister comes, they start sucking their thumbs, regressing back to when they were younger. And then finally, sublimation is where you take out socially. You can't do something, so you take out, find ways socially acceptable to do something. So if you're a peeping Tom and when you become a photographer or nude photographer, Playboy, one thing is not socially acceptable, the other is. Those are the 8. The next thing we do is trait theory, and trait theory is people have traits that are consistent over time and place. It doesn't matter what time it is or what place it is. If you're an optimistic person, you're an optimistic person almost all the time. The thing about trait theory is very predictable and testable, which we like in psychology. We talked about Eisnick. There's a handout which I'll give you. Eisnick first tried to develop personality theory, a personality inventory, and he kind of opened the door, but wasn't very successful. We had Carl Jung, who gave us introvert, extrovert, and also that all traits are on a continuum. You're not 100% this, you're 100% that. With Eisnick's work and Jung's work, we have Cattell, who's the father of trait theory, because he developed the 16 PF, 16 personality factors. Those of you in general psych class, you have that assignment where you take the 16 PF in your head. And so we have source traits and surface traits. Source traits are the 16, well, it's actually 32 because you have introvert, extrovert. And then surface traits are traits that are produced by the source traits. And then we talk about the big 5. McCrae did some studies and decided there were cardinal traits, which are the big 5 that are most common. Ocean is the best way to remember it. Openness, conscientiousness, extroverted, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And so those are the big 5. So on the test, I asked you to write the big 5. You just try to remember ocean for those. Then we looked at humanism very quickly. Humanism, Carl Rogers, they see psychology as a whole. They see it's controllable. They see you need other people. So, and your personality is determined by perceptions. In trait theory, your personality is determined by traits. Freud, your personality is determined by the unconscious. So behavior is, involved in your personality through how you perceive things. Why does one person like chocolate? Why does one person like vanilla? Those are perceptions. Humanists study why they selected those. Um, we talked about very quickly psychological attention is where your perceptions don't match your behavior. You know, you think you're super smart and you're flunking all your classes. So your perception is one thing, behavior they should match for to have feel good. You can't live with psychological tension. Then we looked at behaviorism, and which is kind of funny because they say only study overt behavior. You can't see a personality, but they believe the personality is controlled by the environment. So humanist perceptions, behaviorist, environment, uh, and there's three things they say develop personality: behaviors that were punished and reinforced as a child. So if you're reinforced as being talkative, when you get adult, you're social. Past associations, we associate certain things. Certain things like songs make us unhappy or happy, and then of course the environment. What environment you're in determines your personality. Then the last one is the interactionist position, which is a combination of trait theory with behaviorism. And what they're saying is certain traits are expressed only in certain situations. You don't act the same way in church as you do at a bar. If you do, I'll do it at your church. But the fact is that certain you act differently with your significant other than you do with other people. Okay, those are the five. There's more than there's 11. We only can talk about five. Personality can be assessed in three ways. One is observation, which is behaviorism. Behaviorists use observation. You can just watch other people, body language. You know, you can see what they put on the wall, the room, what they listen to. Then you have inventories. That's trait theories, people. Inventories, we asked them, do you like this or like that? In class, we've got a ton of them. We've given them. And then you have interviews. So there's only three ways. You have observation of personality, you have inventories on personality, and you have interviews. There's two types of interviews. There's unstructured interviews, which humanists use, and that's open, unstructured, flow with the conversation. Then you have structured interviews, which is Freudian. They're set questions so you can compare their responses to other people. So we talk about inventories, not tests. A test you can flunk. You can't flunk an inventory. You have a personality. You can't flunk a personality inventory. But you can flunk one of my tests. That's why in the year 2000, the APA said we can't use the word test anymore. And finally, we have two types of inventories. We have standardized inventories, and we have projective inventories. Instead of structured and unstructured, it would make more sense, but now we can not do that. Standardized inventories are just like a structured interview. They are same questions you asked everybody and you compare. We in class use the 16PF for healthy people, the MMPI for unhealthy people. And the MMPI has a true scale, which is interesting because if you don't get enough of those right, then it'll be thrown out by the computer. And the MMPI is very simple. They got a bunch of questions that schizophrenics answer a certain way. If you answer those the same way, then you might be schizophrenic. So the MMPI is most used inventory for unhealthy people, people who have major medical problems. Then we have projective inventories, which are like unstructured interviews, where you project your personality onto what you're looking at. We look at two in class, the Rorschach, which is a bunch of pictures used for people that have major psychological problems. And then we have the TAT, which is used for people that have psychological problems, but not major ones. The TAT are stories, and you talk about the story, so they believe you project yourself onto the story. And the problem with projective measures is interpretation. Are you interpreting the way you see the picture, or how you interpret the way the client sees the picture? Okay, that's a very small, quick thing on the chapter of personality. And if you have any questions, just give me a call.